Retro.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the Armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
Happy Halloween, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are getting an early start on celebrating Halloween with a discussion of the first two issues of Cavan Scott's Tales of the Nightlands. But before we get into the spookiness, Jay, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
Absolutely. We are not scary, but we can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, as I was just saying, we're discussing Tales of the Nightlands 1 and 2. This is an anthology series of stories, in a way, that Cavan Scott has written and that's been published through Dark Horse Comics. We've got art by Sue Lee for issue 1 and Vincenzo Riccardi for issue 2. It's been lettered by Comic Craft's Tyler Smith and Jimmy Betancourt. The concept designs were by Ian McCaig and Francesco Francavilla, and the cover art was also by Francesco Francavilla. I normally just write down the credits, Jay, and don't give it a whole lot more thought beyond maybe the artist and the writer, because we cover a lot of stuff like this. But then I saw Ian McCaig did the concept designs for this. And of course, you know, he was instrumental in designing things for the prequels and ever since. So him coming up with some sort of concepts for this series really surprised me and impressed me, I guess.
Yes, and I'm with you. As soon as I saw that name, it was kind of like a dog, like, huh?
Yeah.
So very cool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, this is another type of a series that we get almost annually from Cavan Scott, where he leans into the spooky side. And we've had Tales from Jabba's Palace and other type stories where he usually comes up with some sort of a framing device, and then in each episode tells us some sort of a spooky Star Wars story, and then wraps it all up at the end of the fourth issue. This one doesn't really have a framing device, Jay. It is a story, but each issue focuses on a different era of Star Wars, as best I can tell, and we'll get into that a little bit. So, with all those comments having been made, what are your non-spoiler thoughts about these first two issues overall?
I really enjoyed them, and I'm going to be quite honest. I read them aloud to myself, and I had to use my Twi'lek accent when I was going through all of these different voices and things. But honestly, it is a great pace for a kind of on your edge of your seat sort of spooky tale, but it's also within a familiar way of doing things with, these types of, how do I want to say this without being spoilery? Events that can line up just right. As we know, around Halloween, this tends to be the case. If you've got a full moon or if you've got certain things going on, that you can tap into things that are otherworldly. And so I think it was fun to be able to do this in the way that they framed it, being so many years apart that it would make sense from issue 1 to issue 2. And of course, Cavan Scott always does a great job of nailing the characters, especially Anakin and Obi-Wan in this one, in their relationship and the way that they would talk to each other and interact with each other. So I really, really had a great time reading both of these. But what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I liked it quite a bit as well. And it's one of those things where if you are looking for canonical type of developments that push the stories and things like forward, you're not going to get that here. These are intended as fun, spooky Halloween type stories. And really the first issue is not all that spooky. The second one gets a bit more so, but it's really about playing with the characters. And as you suggested, we get Anakin and Obi-Wan in the first one, and I think he did a good job with them. And then we get Luke, Leia primarily on the second one, and he did a good job with them as well.
Mhm.
And it's just this kind of I don't know what the intention of this is, to really make a canon story or something like that. We've kind of talked about some of these other Halloween type anthology collections that Cavan Scott's done in the past, and they just don't neatly fit into a canon storyline because you have lots of things going on all over the place. But it's also kind of like those myth and fables books that came out, where
Ah.
it's almost something like you could see someone telling the story around the campfire, and the
Oh,
way
yeah.
that it's presented as well. And I think it's good for that type of uh, digestion of the story.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. So two thumbs up from us. And with that said, we're kind of got to get into the story. So both of these stories revolve around this character that is initially introduced as the Nightlander, and then later introduced as the Queen of Hitananga. I don't know. Is that how you pronounce it? It's a lot easier to say in my head than I think say out loud. Uh, but how are you pronouncing it?
I think that's fair. I think that sounds
Okay.
pretty good.
Hitanaga. I think that if you say it faster, you do better. Okay.
There you go.
So
There.
the first one has Anakin and Obi-Wan in the time between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones heading to Ryloth to pay the Jedi and the Republic's respects to the family of Tarmid Dal. He's just passed away, and he was the head of the Twi'lek First family. And of course, Anakin has zero interest in doing all this. He thinks the whole thing is dull. He'd rather out be having adventures. And Obi-Wan kind of has to gently remind him that that's not all that Jedi do. We've got other responsibilities here. And then we get introduced to Lady Ceci, who's Tarmid's daughter, and Daisha, who's Tarmid's granddaughter. There's a priestess there by the name of the Grand Guzer. And so Daisha introduces us to this idea of that there is this veil, and then there is a nightmare conjunction. If that is not a spooky name, I don't know what is.
Right.
And during this time, the veil between the Nightlands, which is supposedly where the dead are supposed to reside, and the living is thinned out, and it's possible to speak to the dead. And Daisha didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her grandfather, so she wants to enact this ritual so she can say goodbye to him now. This is everything you need in a setup
Oh,
for
yeah.
a spooky story.
Oh, yeah, for
But
sure. This really mirrors a lot of different types of, spiritual mythology and
uh-huh,
beliefs that we even have here on Earth. Like I was saying, with the different conjunctions of different stars and the way that things come together and this veil being lowered. I mean, this is definitely what people believe, that happens around around Halloween at night,
right.
especially if there's a full moon.
Yeah,
So,
and nothing ever good happens when you thin out the veil
right.
between the living and the dead.
Mhm.
You have the best of intentions. I'm just going to say hi or hello, or reach out to whoever is passed, and then it always goes wrong. And so I don't want to write this off as being Cavan Scott's just adopting a trope. He is intentionally he does this every year. He plays upon these ideas that we have from other pop culture, other myths, and whatever. And yeah, we've seen this type of thing before, but not in Star Wars so much.
Mhm. Mhm. It's almost like playing with a Ouija board.
Yeah, the closest thing I could think of was when Charles Soule wrote the Darth Vader comic, and Vader created his palace on Mustafar, and then he used that power around the versions of the Force there to slash through the veil between the living and the dead, and he went in there in search of Padme,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that all went bad. So I don't know if there was any type of inspiration there or not. Those guys worked together on the High Republic, so perhaps there was. They're
Mhm.
certainly aware of each other, but that was the closest thing I could think of when it comes to Star Wars before.
No, I think that's a good call.
Yeah. So, of course, Ceci and Grand Gazer basically tell Dacia, no, this is not happening. But Anakin seizes upon this idea, and he basically tells her, yeah, just because, you know, they said we couldn't do it, and Dacia had made an appeal to the Jedi, like, you guys would have the Force powers to make this happen. And so they sneak out of the festivities in the Grand Hall, and they go to the chapel where Tarmin's body is lying. And there was a cool little thing that happened here is that Anakin says, "You don't let the bodies lie in state," and he's having these thoughts of Qui-Gon's funeral pyre while
Right.
this is going on, and this completely went over my head at the time that he was thinking about the possibility if Daisha could pull this off, that he could say something to Qui-Gon because he
Mhm.
also wasn't there when Qui-Gon died.
Mhm. Exactly. And I will be honest though, I was a little blindsided by Anakin's choice of who he might have wanted to speak to beyond the realm at this point. I thought it was going to be his mama.
But she's not dead yet at this point.
Oh, that's true. That's right. She's not. Yep. You're absolutely right. Now, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my gosh. Yep. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Cause he's much younger at this point. Yeah. We're not even to Attack of the Clones yet.
Yeah, yeah. So I
True.
mean,
Yes.
if this story had taken place after the Attack of Clones, that's
Right.
exactly
Oh
who he would have
gosh.
talked to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So
but
yeah, it does make sense, but it went over my head as well.
yeah,
Let's just put it
well,
that way.
you know what? You can't be faulted for that because so much of his story is centered around his mother. Leaving his
Mhm.
mother in the Phantom Menace and then losing her in Attack of the Clones, and then the risk of having it all happen again in Revenge of the Sith. So it's just kind of ingrained in everything we know about Anakin.
Well, I appreciate you dealing with my brain pan.
My
You're
pleasure.
always so kind.
So Daisha invokes this ritual after Anakin clumsily tries to use a Jedi mind trick on the guards, and then he tricks them anyway to get them to leave. And they get in there. She sets up the ritual, and it works. And all of a sudden, ghosts start arriving. And the first one shows up in the Grand Hall and is like talking to Obi-Wan. Don't let her remember. Don't let her return. And everyone's like, "Who? What is going on? What are we talking about here?" And
Mhm.
then a ghost shows up professing to be Tarmid, and it attacks the guards who show up at this point, and then it turns out that all is not what it appears, that this is in fact the Nightlander. And we get told that the Nightlands are, it's been mythologized where over time people came to believe it was like where the souls of all their loved one goes, but in reality it's a domain of demons, and they come back and feast on the hope of the living and their dreams.
Right.
I don't think that's even 100% correct, though, because if it is, then why is that other ghost showing up saying, "Don't let her remember, don't let her return"? They're being warned
Yeah.
in
Well,
this
I'm
situation.
wondering, yeah, my take is that perhaps in the Nightlands that not every spirit has these nefarious purposes, that some of them were drug in there, but with the best of intentions, you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? And so it's kind of a morality issue even within the Nightlands. And I think that's really cool on Cavan Scott's part that he's built and almost world building spirituality issues, into this too, because you've got memory and hope built into this. And so yeah, maybe there's some light side within the dark side back there.
Or perhaps it's just like another world, like Hades. It's
Mm, mhm.
that souls go there and, they pay a penance and they're trying to escape. And so someone is there. Yeah, I don't know all of the Twi'lek mythology around death or what they believe and that type of thing. But perhaps it is if you didn't die in battle the right place, you don't end up in Valhalla. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Those type of mythologies that we have here on Earth. These people have been there. They know that this terrible spirit resides there, and so now that the veil is broken, they can try and mold people like you got to do something to prevent her from escaping. But it is
Right.
pretty clever what happens after this is that the Nightlander's trying to possess Dacia so she can be freed, which will come to find an issue too, and to roam the Daylands, the amongst the living. And Anakin, it's revealed Anakin was helping her so that he could speak to Qui-Gon. We kind of addressed that already. But then he offers himself up to the Nightlander instead, which creates confusion. And it was all a ruse so that the time would run out because they basically had to till midnight in order to talk to anyone in the Nightlands. And she takes too long trying to possess him. And so her time's up and she gets banished back there again.
Right.
So, that's kind of a classic waiting for the sun to rise type of story in horror stories that we've seen before.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But then we get to issue 2. So, and before we get to that, I do kind of like the way that Obi-Wan and Anakin, I don't want to say necessarily reconciled because it's not like they fell out, but at the end, Obi-Wan's kind of comforting Anakin and said, Qui-Gon would have been proud, as am I. So that was a
Yes,
touching master and apprentice moment there.
it was. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, it's again showcasing that experience between Obi-Wan and Anakin and still staying true to their progression of their storyline, which I think was very sweet.
I agree. I agree. So, all right. Well, moving on to issue 2. This takes place in the classic original trilogy era, whichever you want to call it, and it begins with Luke fighting Darth Vader. I don't know if this is what they were going for necessarily, but the art is very similar to the first issue of Star Wars that came out in 2015 when they brought back Marvel Star Wars comics.
Oh,
Luke is dressed the same way in this dream, and he's having this fight with Darth Vader. I'm having a little trouble placing exactly when this issue takes place, if it's before or after The Empire Strikes Back. I want to say it's after because the spirit of Yoda shows up and advises Luke at one point, and Luke seems to have some notion that Darth Vader might be his father. But at the same time, when they use the art from that first issue, which takes place after A New Hope and before The Empire Strikes Back, I was just kind of scratching my head a little bit, trying to figure out what exactly they were going for there. But what did you think?
I'll admit I was a little confused about this as well, and I had a little bit more trouble following exactly what was going on. So I'm glad I was reading this aloud. But I'm with you. I think maybe that's the point is to keep it a little bit vague so that that way it doesn't kind of pigeonhole the story into any one part of the timeline.
Right. So, but it is 30 years later. So I guess if we knew exactly when after the first one, so if we knew exactly when that year that took place, we could probably get a
This
definitive
is
answer to that.
true. Yes,
But
yes.
here we are. So again, in this dream, Luke is fighting Darth Vader. Leia, Han, and Chewbacca and the droids are on the run towards the Falcon. And then, Vader said, is trying to encourage Luke to stay because he is his father and that, he should join them. But Luke refuses and pushes Vader through a window using the Force. But they get to the Falcon, and Han seems like he may be possessed because he's all dark. This is also what kind of makes me think this after Empire Strikes Back. But then Vader shows up in this weird dreamscape and destroys Han, destroys Leia, destroys 3PO. And then when Luke is clutching 3PO's head, 3PO says something to the effect that, Master Luke can't save anybody. And then there's all this like agreement from people that are happening until Yoda arrives and tells Luke that Vader's alive and he's waiting on Arabnir, which is a planet we've never heard of before, as far as I'm aware. And he wakes up, and of course, this has all been a dream. So, what'd you make of all that dream sequence? Because it was kind of wild.
Yeah, it's a little psychedelic, but I
Yeah.
think we just answered some of our own questions that it had to have been around the time of The Empire Strikes Back or very soon thereafter because Yoda's in it,
Uh
and
huh.
Luke didn't meet Yoda until The Empire Strikes Back. And I think that when we see Han, that's very carbon freezing-esque looking
Yeah.
in some of those panels. So I think that that is, yeah, definitely in that particular timeline. But I mean, it's very psychedelic in a lot of ways with these different panels. And, I think that again, Luke feels like he's having this dream. And then when he wakes up, he's like, oh, it was just a dream. But yet, obviously, there were some things getting into his dream, almost like a Freddy Krueger kind of,
Right.
appearance and things.
And here's the other thing. It's like Yoda shows up and he's very vivid compared to all the psychedelia you're talking about.
Hmm.
And Yoda's reminding him that, no, it's not necessarily your destiny. Your father's alive and he's waiting for you on Rabnir. And so Yoda sends him there. And, Luke wakes up from this and he's so certain that there's a possibility this is all true. And he asks R2, find Rabnir for me. Oh, it's out in wild space. Interesting. And then
Right.
he basically brushes off Leia to take an X-Wing and go there.
Yeah, literally bumps right into her.
Yeah.
Excuse
When he
me.
gets there, he finds Daisha, who we met in the first issue, and she says, "Well, I know your father," and she does. She met him, 30 years ago, and now Daisha's all grown up, and she says how he's no longer among the living, but she says she's a disciple of Hinanaga. Just like I said, say it fast.
There you go. Sounds good.
And they can speak with those who have moved past the Daylands, and it is now the next Nightmare Conjunction. And so she's going to summon Anakin's spirit. We find out, of course, is a trick, but Anakin shows up and starts talking to Luke, but it's all a ruse so that the Nightlander, who we find out is called the Queen of Hinanaga, is trying to possess somebody else, and Luke is like an ideal candidate here. What do you think about this? Because I'm trying to decide, did Yoda really appear in Luke's vision as Yoda to send him to Ribnar as some sort of a test or some sort of development of his Jedi abilities? Or did Daisha somehow successfully use this vision of Yoda as a ruse to get him to go there? What do you think?
Ooh, I like both of those ideas. Well, I mean, Daisha has been, I think, fallen into the spiritual shaman realm of her duties, I guess you could say, watching over the Nightlands, which I really think is a cool way for them to have evolved her character from issue one and also tie it back in. But I do like the idea because obviously Yoda has done this before with Luke, where he has put ideas into his head about going different places or doing different things. But I kind of wonder if it wasn't Daisha that was utilizing that vision of Yoda to put these ideas in Luke's head, because she was kind of using whatever spirituality conduit she could to reach out, because Yoda was so force or Yoda Luke was so force sensitive that she had almost like an electrical, ability or spark to locate him specifically on the planet. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's like this just raises questions. We don't have to have answers because it's a fun story regardless, and there's just not enough
Right.
pages to get into all the
Yeah.
details. But one, how does Daisha even know who Yoda is?
Mhm.
Two, how would she even know who Luke Skywalker is? And that this Luke Skywalker is in fact related to Anakin Skywalker. So, perhaps it is the Queen of Hinanaga feeding her this information. Perhaps she knows from beyond the veil, this type of a thing.
Mhm.
Or, it is just she knew enough about Anakin that, she was able to get that information through the Force. But at any rate, there are these questions, and I don't know that we necessarily need to have the answers. I could see, Yoda came to Luke's rescue in the dream, and if he hadn't done that, it's not like anything would have happened to Luke. He would have woke up and it would have been a dream, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, but that doesn't definitively mean that it was in fact Yoda. I mean, if Daisha somehow knew about Yoda, she could have used that image of Yoda because it would have been convincing to Luke in that
Mhm.
regard. So
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
just think that they radiate these strong force signatures kind of. And I wonder if that's what, cuz I mean even later on the spirit looks at Leia and says, "Ooh, you're even better."
Right.
Kind of
Right.
thing.
Well, so getting to that, as all this is going on, the queen is trying to possess Luke. Daisha realizes this was all wrong, and Luke is starting to give in after hearing about his father. He basically says, "This is point. You're right. I'll do it. This is pointless." Which I don't know that I bought that that's what Luke would do, but neither here nor there. Leia
Mhm.
arrives and she says, "There is always a point. There is always hope." And as you were just saying, the Queen of Hinanaga says, "Oh, this one's even better. She embodies hope for peace in the future." And now I'm further confused because if it was all Hinanaga that set this all up and Daisha, they knew about Luke, wouldn't they be able to use the same resources to figure out who Leia was in this situation?
I
But
wonder
she was an
if
unknown to them.
yeah, and I wonder if it's because if you're looking at anything being like I was just saying, Luke's force powers as being kind of a conduit, his powers have been uncovered, whereas Leia's are still more latent. You know what I mean? It's there, but nobody really knows about them yet. And so it's not as, stable of an energy. I'm reaching here.
Yeah, I get it. It's as good an explanation as anything when it comes down to it. But if Daisha hasn't met Yoda, then how can she pluck that out of the air? And it would stand to reason that she would just as easily be able to pluck out Leia out of thin air as well, or have some idea. If they can intuit Yoda's relationship to Luke, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to figure out something about Leia as well. That Leia is somehow related to Anakin. But again, that just kind of goes back to how we started talking about these two issues. They're just fun stories. You can't get wrapped up in all the details here. I'm just fascinated by how this creature works, is what it comes down to. What are the scope of her powers? That is something of a nightmare, is that, this creature shows up and it gets inside your mind and learns all these things of it. And so, perhaps that's, they somehow found about Luke and they set the trap for Luke, but Leia showed up and that just seemed to be, an even better alternative. And of course it doesn't work. Luke and Leia use their powers jointly to send Hinanaga back to the Vale. And then Daisha tells Luke about when she got to meet Anakin. So that's not the only other thing about this story, is that Luke goes into Return of the Jedi still with some doubts about whether or not Vader is his father. And it seems like there isn't any doubt here. Yoda shows up in the vision saying, hey, your father's there on Ribnar. And, the vision is Vader in this situation. And yeah, so I would kind of feel like the questions would have to have been answered by then.
Yeah, and he gets to actually see his father as Anakin too, which is super cool. And then later on, obviously gets to see him as a Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi. But yeah, it's so fun to explore this story because, like you said, it's one of those things that I think if we try to overanalyze it, we miss the point. But yet I can see where you're going with that too, in that, yeah, hearing about Vader and then seeing all of this, you would think would stick with him a little bit
What this could
more.
have used is just one line in here that where this vision of Anakin says, no, Vader betrayed me and killed me, to
Oh,
further plant
yeah.
that doubt here that, I was a Jedi and I'm proud of you for becoming one. It's like, and you can, something about, working together, or they could figure out how to defeat Vader and get revenge or something like that. I don't know. But if they just thrown something like that, I think it would have been cool. But you're dealing with just 25-ish or so pages to tell the story. That's not a lot to work with. And it was a very, very visual story at the beginning. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I don't mean to diminish this. This is fun. It achieves
Oh,
what it
yeah.
sets out to do. It's just that this is what we do. we analyze
It's
a little
true.
bit, so we think critically about it, and so by doing so, we're not saying it's terrible. It's just just got me thinking. I was not expecting to think about this as much as I did, but I can't wait to get the third and the fourth issues. So we'll revisit this story after those are out. So I'm guessing
Oh,
some point
yeah.
either December or January, probably January, because we have a lot of end of the year stuff that we need to do as well. But
But no, this
definitely
is
coming up.
why I love doing these because if I would have just read this just to read it, it would have been like, oh yeah, that was fun. But with us analyzing it, it really does peel back those layers of thought and it makes it just much more of an extraordinary journey for sure.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. Well, anything else you want to bring up about these before we wrap up?
I think Hinananga sounds more like a Pokemon name than anything. Just saying.
Oh, well, it kind of reminded me of Dianaga when it came down to, which also could be a Pokemon now that you mention it.
There you
So,
go.
all right.
No, but
Cool.
overall loved it. Yeah, these were fun.
Definitely fun. All right. Well, then, just want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of Tales of the Nightlands. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to catch what else we do here on the show, we got upcoming news. We're going to be getting into Vision soon. We'll have our next entry of our Revenge of the Sith series next month. We've got World Between Worlds, where Jay rounds up Star Wars fashion and lifestyle products. And we talk about those. And with the gift giving season right around the corner, you might want to tune in for those. If you have a
Yeah.
Star Wars fan in your life, you need to get a gift for. So make sure you subscribe to the show on your podcatcher of choice, and you'll get all these 3 times a week. And then once you've done that, we would greatly appreciate it if you do us the favor of leaving a rating and review on your podcatcher. That just helps get the show in front of more eyes. And then if you want to dive into the back catalog of the show, head over to retrozapp.com. You can find all previous 957 shows, as well as some other great shows that are on the network covering all aspects of geek culture. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be reached?
Yes, and I will say I am gathering lots and lots of things for the next World Between Worlds. So don't be scared because there's lots to pick from. So we are very easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest boards and all of the ideas for everything Star Wars that I've got going on over there for the show. And then we also have our 2 YouTube outlets. So you can check us out on YouTube and YouTube Music. So please head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. Let us know what you thought of this show and any others as well. And you can also reach out to us via email at podcaststardust@gmail.com. So please send us your questions. We are hoping, Dennis just did a great show not too long ago on listener questions, and we are really hoping to do another one of those. And I'm jumping in on the next one, obviously. So we want your questions about the podcast, about Star Wars in general. And when we have enough, we will put them together in another listener question episode. So once again, that is podcaststardust@gmail.com. And then you can also pick up some new Podcast Stardust swag or wardrobe choices on our TeePublic store. And the link to that is in our show notes. So please check that out and just know that every purchase does help to support the show.
Okay. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll be wrapping up the week with Star Wars news. Monday is up in the air right now. We'll either be getting into Star Wars Visions, which has just come out, or we'll be doing an episode of the Clone Wars alike. But you'll just have to tune in and find out because we don't even know yet. But with that said, thanks for listening to episode 958 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Have a happy Halloween. And until next time, may the Force be with you.